Hey there! Today we are diving into finding your voice, how to craft your story and share your message with confidence. I am super excited to share this information with you because no matter what industry you're in, no matter your skill level, and no matter how comfortable you are or aren't in front of a microphone talking to individuals on a stage, here's an opportunity to literally brush up those skills and level up on finding your voice. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So, today we are going to dive into quite a few different things that all resonate with this idea of finding your voice. Now, when I started my public speaking journey, believe me, I was not proficient. I was nervous. It took me a long time to honestly get comfortable in front of speaking to people. And for those who don't know this about me, believe it or not, when I was younger, I actually was terrified of people and would hide behind my mom and hold on to her so tight and literally had a hard time even talking to my own family members. And so there was a series of things that I did in my own life, which I'll share throughout today's conversation, that really helped propel my confidence in public speaking. And one of the things that I want you to know just off the bat is when you share your story, you inspire other people to share theirs. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your topics, your themes. What are you going to talk about? I want you to keep that in mind because once you really soak that in and know that when you share your story, no matter whatever the story is, whether you're talking about real estate in your real estate journey or talking about how you overcame something traumatic, your story matters. And I think when we really soak that piece of information in and really harness that energy and knowing that, hey, I'm going to make an impact today, and this message was intentional and I need someone to hear it. So keep that in mind. So today's takeaways are going to be one, advocating for yourself. What does that look like? Vulnerability in finding your voice. That means we're going to be taking a step outside of your comfort zone and literally leaving the comfort zone completely. Identifying themes for storytelling, developing chapters for your story. So think about you're writing a book, not literally, but you're writing this imaginary book and you want to be able to tell your story in front of an audience or maybe a series of different audiences, and you're like, well, what the heck do I talk about? Well, you have so many chapters in your life that you can talk about that you might not realize are actual chapters that you can share information on. Next, we're going to be talking about public speaking tips. I'm going to give you some insider tips on what you can do literally right now to get more confident in your speaking. And then lastly, where to share your story. So if you're someone like me that was so passionate about this idea of empowering people to get out of abusive relationships and wanted to share your story, and believe me when I say this, when I first started sharing my story, or better yet, when I was on the news for the first time talking about our very first event, I don't know why, but half of my face wasn't moving because I was so nervous. It's like my mouth didn't want to open and literally talk. And so I had to continue practicing, continuing to put myself out there to really get more comfortable in what I was talking about. So the more you talk about it, the more comfortable you will get. So we're going to go ahead and talk about all of these key takeaways today, and you're going to dive in. You're going to get so much information that you literally can use immediately so you can start sharing your story. And first and foremost, who am I? Well, I'm Kristen Faith Sharp. I'm the founder and CEO of the Boss Babe Networking and the Nonprofit Makeover. I like how I just combined all those names. I tried to in one thing. So let me try this again. My name is Kristen Faith. I'm the founder and CEO of Boss Babe Networking and the Nonprofit Makeover. I am a humanitarian Red Cross award winner. I have been on multiple speaking tours. I've been featured in Glamour magazine and dozens of other media outlets. I created a nonprofit after I left an abusive relationship. It literally helped propel me into the speaker that I am today. And a lot of the information that I'm going to be sharing honestly stems from that experience of how I went from being voiceless to having a voice to empowering millions of people around the world to share their story. In that journey of sharing my story, I had the opportunity to work with tons of nonprofits and companies and corporations all across the world, from Sephora to different media outlets to tons of different nonprofits, to really help elevate voices and to empower people to understand that, again, their voice matters. And when you empower someone to share their story, it literally creates this community of unity. It creates this opportunity for people to feel more comfortable and and for people to feel more included in whatever situation that you created. Additionally, I've had the opportunity to work with tons of different celebrities, from CBS sports analysts James Brown to adult entertainers to Seinfeld's Jason Alexander to Miss America and so many other people. Because of my impact on social media, I've been able to reach about 200 million people online, with nothing other than engaging content, a story, and a mission. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into it and first share that a lot of people are scared of public speaking. Glossophobia is a fear of public speaking, and in layman's terms, it's a fear of public speaking that about 75% of people population have this fear. This means that a lot of people, more people than not, are afraid of this idea of being on a microphone and sharing stories. Or let's just get this, maybe there is no microphone. Maybe it's just you speaking in front of people. There is this high fear of public speaking. And honestly, for me, it was, well, does my story matter? Oh my gosh, what if I mess up? Oh my gosh, what if I say ums? Oh my gosh, what if I have lipstick on my teeth? What if, what if, what if, what if, what if? So this anxiety of fear literally fills people to the point of literally, I'd rather not do this. Another example that you might find funny or maybe not funny is, I'm going to share this little quick story. At my wedding, I asked my parents to speak on the microphone in front of our guests, and I wanted my parents to actually say the blessing or the prayer over the meal. And my mom was so nervous, and she actually had written out a really beautiful piece for our blessing, and she left it in the hotel room. And she was like, oh my gosh, what do I say? What do I say? And she could have totally spoke from the heart, which she has many times over. But because she was on a microphone in front of other people, her nerves got the best of her. And so she, because of those experiences that she's had previously of being interviewed on the news because of different things that I've been doing, she's had this fear of like, oh my gosh, I can't speak. I don't know what to say. And she'll second guess herself when in reality, my mom is a really great speaker, and she also is a really great host and a really great person to be around, and she has no problem having conversations with people, but it's this idea of being in front of people that kind of catches her off guard or has that little fear, lingering within. So if you are that person who is afraid of speaking, we're going to take that away today. There is no more fear starting now. So, their journey of finding me, what does that look like? Well, I want to take you back when I moved to Colorado Springs. I'm from San Diego. Was born and raised there, literally did pageants, went to school there, everything in between, even went to college in San Diego, only a few minutes away from my home because I was just a San Diego girl. I met my husband, well, back in San Diego, and long story short, we decided to take a leap of faith and move to Colorado Springs. We didn't know very many people. Fortunately, I had a business already, my nonprofit. For him, he was a veteran or is a veteran and also does music. And so we took a leap of faith. We had came to visit here to Colorado Springs multiple times in 1 year. We were courted by a local family who does amazing things for our community here in Colorado Springs, and decided, you know what? Let's check cost of living, and cost of living compared to California at the time was absolutely a huge difference. So, taking a leap of faith, we decided that we were going to move here. And the caveat to that is the place in which we were looking to move into said, oh, we can totally accommodate you all. The kicker is you have to move in within the next 30 to 45 days. We looked at each other in complete disbelief and we're like, that's really soon. Keep in mind, I pretty much lived in the same house my entire life, grew up in my childhood home, only lived outside of that home only for a few months when I was in that abusive relationship. And so moving out here was a complete culture shock, literally and figuratively. The people looked different. I didn't have those same connections. It was very intimidating. It was a lot. When we decided to move here, so we did take that leap of faith. We decided that we were going to do it. And when we did touch down in Colorado Springs, my life completely changed. And what I meant by that is my grandmother, who pretty much was a second mother to me. I got a phone call from my dad saying that my grandmother had a few days to live. So I literally packed my bags and jumped on a plane that same day with my husband, and my grandmother ended up living a few more months after that. But that grief process was absolutely treacherous to go through. In addition to that, the person who abused me literally abused someone else. I got a phone call from the district attorney's office. They told me that the person who abused me did abuse someone else, and they wanted to subpoena me and testify against this person. Keep in mind, I did not have the chance to testify against that person when I was actually in that relationship because I waited too long. We can talk about that a whole nother time. But long story short, there were so many things that were happening in my life that year. And I was in a brand new place and really had to find me again. I called it my journey of finding faith, my journey of finding my faith in myself, but more importantly, my faith in God. And what does that mean? And we can talk about that a whole nother time because that's a whole conversation in and of itself. So, really, everything that I just shared was a part of my story. And when we think about sharing our story as a whole, we can think about it for me, I'm a very visual person. So I think about it from the perspective of, well, what is that story and what does that look like? So for me, I want to kind of encourage you to start thinking about this from a visual aspect. It's kind of like an umbrella. When you're looking at an umbrella, you see that number one, the overall arching theme is an umbrella. But if you're looking at this picture alongside me, every single one of these umbrellas have multiple little prongs. So let's just say 8 different prongs. What I like to call that is your different themes within that umbrella. So, in the story that I just shared with you, the journey of finding me, I call that journey the umbrella. And the themes under that is moving to Colorado, uh, the journey of, testifying against the person who abused me, maybe the journey of grief and, losing someone that you love. Another one is literally finding yourself or identity. So I literally just gave you 4 different ideas on what themes could be just based on the story that I shared with you. But I want you to take a moment and feel free to pause this and think about what your themes are. If you're thinking about your life as a whole grand scheme of things, what different chapters in your life make up your story? And when you're thinking about this, think of it from the perspective of, well, what am I going to share? And I'll give you another example outside of me. Let's just say you're an entrepreneur, and let's just say you have created multiple successful businesses, but in that, you failed a few times. Maybe you went bankrupt. Maybe someone who was a business partner with you decided to do some shady stuff and kind of put some hindrances or some obstacles in the way of you fulfilling your entrepreneurial dreams. Maybe you're a veteran. Maybe you want to talk about your journey as a soldier. Maybe you want to talk about growing up with military parents or being a military child. Maybe you want to talk about having a blended family and the challenges and wins and struggles in that journey. Maybe you are a creative and you want to talk about your love for creating and the different ways in which you create. So I gave you a whole bunch of ideas for themes. And I want you to think about what your overall arching theme is. And quite honestly, if you're thinking right now, well, Kristen, I have a whole bunch of themes that I could give you. I could tell you a million of them. Well, that's the beautiful part. Think about it. J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, literally created series of books about different chapters of the journey of Harry Potter. Or think about it from a Netflix series when you're watching Shameless and you're thinking of the different things that they talk about in that show. Or maybe you're thinking of, you love Marvel and there are different superheroes, there are different storylines, there are different plot twists. And so, in that, to kind of give you an example, if you're thinking of the overall arching theme, let's just say it could be relationships, because that's a really broad theme. You can talk about it from good relationships you've had, bad relationships you've had, how to have healthy relationships. Those are three different prongs within that umbrella. Again, maybe you're a veteran and you're like, what do I want to talk about as a veteran? If the overall arching umbrella is veteran or your journey as a veteran, you can talk about getting into the military, how it changed your life, maybe even examples of what it's like to be in the military. Think about it from the perspective of what value can I bring to an audience if I was asked tomorrow, hey, I want you to speak in front of 100 people tomorrow about X, Y, or Z. What would you share? And trying to give you a better insight into that is if you only have 20 minutes to share your story, a piece of that, even just a little tiny piece of that overall arching theme of being a veteran, what are you going to share? One of the things before you put this on pause that I had to really uh, figure out when I was sharing my story of how I was affected by domestic violence is, gosh, if I only have 20 minutes, what the heck am I going to say? I feel like it takes 20 minutes for me to even just say my name. But I had to think about it. If I had 20 minutes, what is going to be the most high impact, most value, ready to share this information, but also I want to give them enough information for them to have any sort of gems, but also get them hungry for more information for them to want to invite me back to continue my story. As a professional public speaker, that is ultimately the goal, is that you don't want to give them your entire recipe or your entire cookbook. You want to be able to give them a taste that, this tastes good, and also kind of get a feel for, oh, okay, I kind of know what to expect from that person, but also, oh, I wonder what desserts this person makes. So I'm giving you all these analogies for you to think about. So I want you to take a moment and put this on pause and draw out what are some overall arching themes that you can talk about? Again, you can talk about parenting, you can talk about your life, but again, your life is the overall arching umbrella, and there are different chapters within that umbrella. We're going to get into chapters in just a second, but think about the different themes that you can talk about. Go ahead and put this on pause right now, and we will pick up in just a few minutes when you're ready. So now that we're into the chapters, creating the chapters for your story, we want to start talking about those different prongs in that umbrella. I'm going to give you some stories and some real examples here in just a minute, but I want you to start thinking about what are the chapters in those stories. So just a minute ago, you wrote down the overall arching themes of what your story consisted of. So let's just say you talked about relationships and the relationships that you were in, good relationships, bad ones. Maybe you experienced divorce and you're talking about that experience. Those are different chapters. And let me even give you a more specific example. If we're talking about creating chapters and the overall arching theme is relationships, and you're like, okay, Kristen, I want to talk about that divorce. But quite honestly, I had two divorces. So, literally, I would say if your overall arching theme is relationships and you had two divorces, I would talk about those two separate experiences because I'm sure I can't read your mind and I don't know exactly what you went through, but I'm sure those relationships literally taught you something else. So maybe the first one was an abusive marriage, and you're like, I want to teach people about the warning signs that I didn't see when I was in that relationship. And maybe the other one was, I don't know, they had an addiction problem. I know this sounds so bad, but I'm just giving you an example, okay? So maybe the second relationship or second marriage that you were in had addiction, and you want to talk about that. What it's like to be married to an addict. What is it like to overcome that? Maybe you stayed in that relationship for a long period of time and then decided, you know what, this wasn't for me. Maybe you stayed in that relationship and you're still in that relationship. No judgment here. It's your story, and it's what can you share? What are you willing to share in that chapter for people to know? Because that's also something that you want to think about. Is if you're sharing information about someone, parents, children, exes, whatever the case may be, something that I want you to really think about that I very much have shared when I was running my nonprofit is it's not about that person necessarily. Example, when I talk about the person who abused me, as you can see and hear in my voice, I don't call him my ex. I try not to call him my abuser. I try not to call him my anything because he's not my anything. I don't want any sort of affiliation or ownership, quote unquote, of that person. So when I share what I went through as a survivor of domestic violence, I never made it about him. I talked about the abuse that I endured, but again, it's the abuse I endured. So it's not so much analyzing him, it's not so much his name is, it's not so much highlighting him and how much of a piece of crap person he was. It's not about that. So when you are thinking about, oh my gosh, I want to share about, childhood trauma and maybe this trauma that I went through as a child, it's not about my parents were bad, my parents this, and it's all their fault, which, let's be honest, if you went through childhood trauma, I want you to know that your voice and your story and your experience matters. But does that mean that it's all about talking about your parents in a way that isn't conducive or productive? Let me give you an example for that. I witnessed domestic violence growing up. And sometimes it's uncomfortable for my parents to hear about that story. However, it's my story to tell. Now, one of the things that I really appreciated about my parents being open and honest and honestly vulnerable with me is that they were like, hey, it kind of triggers us to hear about the past. And I totally get it. And so you kind of want to be mindful for the people who are a part of your story that are still a part of your life, that this impacts them too. And so, in the way in which you want to share stories, is you want to be mindful of those individuals, but you also want to be honest and truthful in those stories as well. And so, when I share about growing up with domestic violence, I want to make sure that the details that I'm sharing are mindful of my parents, but also educational at the same time. And so, an example for that is these are some of the things that I witnessed as a child. And these are how those experiences impacted my life and the decisions that I've made as a young woman and as an adult. I got into an abusive relationship because I saw this example growing up. And some of the same things that the person who abused me did, my dad did to my mom. And it was really hard, and it still is really hard to think about that and make that connection. But I think it's really important for me to share that story because, in the event that I'm educating, let's just say, social workers, or I'm educating doctors, or maybe I'm educating parents who are also in a similar situation that I was in, I want them to understand that the decisions and actions and behaviors that they are choosing right now affect their children. And this to me allows me to break the cycle for other families and break generational curses so other families don't have to go through what I did. And so, when you are sharing your story and your experience, think about that as well in those chapters because it's more than just sharing information. It's how can I educate? How can I empower? How can I connect this community together so together we can use our experiences to be better people? So, it's not just a pity party, it's not just throwing shade, it's not just being negative. I want to use my experiences for good, and I want to be able to create an impact for people that may have witnessed or experienced similar things as I have. And I want to create value so other people can learn from my experiences. So, when you are creating the chapters, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to write those chapters down, and you don't have to write the literal chapters. But when you're thinking about your umbrella and you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to talk about relationships, and then I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Honestly, those three prongs could literally be stories in and of itself. And you're going to dive into the in those three chapters. So I just gave you the answers. So the umbrella is relationships, and the three prongs are the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so if you want to write about being a veteran or a business owner, or maybe you want to talk about having a blended family, your overarching theme is blended families. You can talk about co parenting. You can talk about parenting. You can talk about the relationship with your partner. You can talk about tips and tricks. Those are literally four different themes or four different chapters that you can talk about for your story. And I'm going to go ahead and give you another visual example right now. So when you're crafting the themes of your story, you have so much flavor and ingredients to give to that story. So, as you already heard, I have overcome domestic violence. I talk about this very openly. I'm literally an open book, hence why I created this training for you. I want to be able to give you tools on what you can do in your life and in your story to literally implement this real time. So I'm going to give you a visual, and then I'm going to give you another visual of what you can do to apply this information to literally start crafting your story, putting together information about who you are and how you can change the world with your story. And best believe you can and you will change the change the narrative and change the world with your story. So this is literally my example. So my overarching theme is, my life, my journey to becoming a survivor. I can literally change the words however which way. Um, but here's some examples. If my overarching theme was relationships or my life or becoming the woman that I am today or healing or childhood trauma, whatever the case may be, all of those things could honestly become a story within its story. So that's really what chapters are, is they're stories within the overarching theme of a story. So childhood trauma is literally a big part of my story, but I literally can break it down from the impact or the literal, you know, verbalizing what I went through. That's a whole thing in and of itself. Teen dating violence, I can talk about that literal story, the warning signs, the red flags, helping teens. I have literally talked to schools and professionals about what they can do to support teens on campus. I've talked to students about what they can do as bystander intervention to empower fellow students, how they can literally take action to help end unhealthy relationships on campus. So I'm literally giving you a whole bunch of examples. All of these things here can be umbrellas, and they also can be stories within a story. Domestic violence, what are the red flags? What are the warning signs? This literally for me could be 1,000 different chapters, but it also could be 1,000 different themes. Examples. Uh, Culture and domestic violence literally can be a story within a story, meaning the impact of domestic violence on BIPOC families, the impact of domestic violence on the economy, the impact of domestic violence on our community. So, those are three literal umbrellas. In those umbrellas, I can literally give you a gazillion different topics that I'd be able to speak on simply on this topic alone. So, if you are, again, a an entrepreneur and you're like, what can I talk about? Literally, how did you become an entrepreneur? Literally tell me about uh, what are some things that women in business should know about becoming an entrepreneur? What are some things that you wish that you would have known becoming an entrepreneur? What are the challenges of women of color going into business? How can you succeed in business with no money? I mean, those are literally a whole bunch of different prongs that you can talk about. I think it's so interesting when I get the opportunity to meet with different women in business and they're like, "Well, Kristen, I don't really have a story to tell." Yes, you do. You 1000% do. Give me 5 minutes of your time and I can honestly tell you what story, prongs, chapters, themes that you honestly could write about. I think sometimes when we get in our head, and women being women, is we overthink, or I don't know if anyone's going to want to hear this, or I'm just a. First of all, you are not just a anything. You are everything and then some. highlight that real quick. You are everything and then some. So when you're thinking about your story, or maybe you're even hung up on what that story is, I am going to put some information in the notes of this here to give you a way for us to contact one another and for us to spend some time literally creating and crafting your story through our creative business strategy. There is so much opportunity that you are probably sitting on, and so much opportunity and income that you are sitting on that you have not tapped into yet. So, I'm going to give you another visual, stories upon stories, because your girl loves telling them. Okay, so if I were to say, like I said a second ago, my overall arching umbrella is domestic violence. And I just said a couple of those themes. I'm just going to go back for a second. So take a quick snapshot. You don't literally have to, but literally, here are 5 different prongs here, which literally can be 5 different themes or chapters in and of itself. And here's proof. So, my overall arching theme here is domestic violence, but I'm going to make mini umbrellas, childhood trauma. Here are literally several topics that relate to childhood trauma. There's the angle of, well, what was her experience going through that traumatic relationship? Or how do you create, now changing directions? Well, I know that Kristen created a domestic violence advocacy nonprofit. What does that look like? So that could literally be 100 different topics in and of itself. Example, okay, well, how do you create a nonprofit? What are things that I should be knowing about nonprofits? How did you use social media to create social change? How did you change the face of advocacy? Who did you partner with and how did you do it? Those are all different topics that can relate to this overarching theme. But again, I am not pigeonholing myself into one topic and one topic only. I know without a shadow of a doubt, I am more than domestic violence, and you are more than just what you believe your story is. So when you're thinking about creating your chapters and your umbrella, I want you to be so creative, and I want you to think about it from the perspective of, I don't know you and I want to know you. Who are you? And I think that is also a question that we often get hung up on, because sometimes as adults, it's hard for us to be like, I don't know or it's easy for us to be like, I don't know who I am, but I'm just a mom. I'm just a school teacher. You're not just. You are everything. Say it with me. You are everything and then some. So when you're thinking about crafting your story, let's just say I asked you to write a book tomorrow. And you're like, well, shoot, what the heck do I talk about? And what's funny is I literally had the opportunity to partner with a local publication to write my story. And in that story, I started writing it, da 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 da. And then I was like, wait, I don't really want to write about this angle because I feel like I have to write it in a different light. I feel like I have to include different information. So even though the theme, the overall arching umbrella, was the same in a nutshell, I had to switch gears and wear a different hat to be able to share a different angle of that story. So, if you had the opportunity tomorrow, again, tomorrow is a busy day, right? Tomorrow you are writing a story, you were given 3,000 words. What are you writing about? Maybe in that 3,000 words, you have the opportunity to write about different things that relate to that, again, that overarching umbrella. But what is that? I want you to take some time to think about what themes you would talk about. Now, think the themes should be something along the lines of, I'm giving you a microphone. I want you to educate me on X, Y, or Z topic. So if you are writing about, I'm a mom, I want you to write something or be mindful that when you are writing something or talking about something, that it's educational, it's bringing value. So no matter what the audience is, because you literally, if I gave you a microphone tomorrow and I said, hey, I want you to talk about being a mom, I don't want you to say, hi, I'm Kristen. I'm a bonus mom of 4 kids and it's great. I need you to give me substance. I need you to give me value. Maybe I'm talking at the stepmom conference of the year and My topic is, of course, being a blended family. So I literally can do a presentation on the challenges of being a stepmom. I can talk about tips and tricks on how to create a healthy relationship with your family. I can talk about the role of what a wife should could or should be to their partner that maybe brought in the children in the relationship, and how that dynamic needs to be nurtured and cultivated in that relationship beyond the relationship you have with your kids. So those are three literal keynote presentations that I can do tomorrow if you asked me to do a presentation. So if you're a mom and you're listening to this right now and you're like, well, Kristen, what do I talk about? So if you are a mom, I want you to talk about, hypothetically, you're a single mom and you're like, well, okay, I'm a single mom, now what? Tell me, talk to me about the challenges or the raw truth of being a single mom. I want you to talk about the wins that you have as a single mom, because I believe we don't hear enough of those stories. I want you to talk about the challenges of co parenting, or maybe the lack thereof of that relationship between you and your previous partner. Those are different topics that you can talk about being a mom. You can talk about, your journey becoming a mom, and maybe you didn't want to have kids and you had kids and now you're figuring life out, and maybe this conversation is going to be different if you're speaking to teen moms or you're speaking to professionals in business who are trying to balance their life of being a mom and a professional. As you think about your chapters and you start thinking about the different ways in which you can tell that story, the audience matters as well. So if you are looking at this right here, this graph that I am showing you, the stories upon stories, each one of these stories can literally be tailored to the audience. Now, if you were to ask me, hey, Kristen, can you talk about breaking the cycle of trauma with youth? I could. Would I suggest that being the first topic that I introduce to kids? I don't know. But I could create a conversation where I'm talking to maybe high school kids about how maybe they're in unhealthy homes, but what they can do to literally take action and advocate for change in their home and in their community. And so when you're creating your stories upon stories graph, just like mine, I want you to think about that as well. Is that who is your target demographic? Because maybe you don't want to, or maybe your topics don't apply to youth. Maybe you only want to talk about things to youth because you're so passionate about that demographic of people that maybe you want to tailor your conversations to that demographic of folks. So think about that. Maybe create multiple stories upon stories, and depending on your audience, will kind of help you figure out, well, who is my audience? Because honestly, this is the first of many conversations and trainings that we should have. If you're like, hey, Kristen, I want to become a public speaker and I want to be able to build my brand. Now, I'm not talking about building your brand in this training, but there are definitely other opportunities where I can absolutely support you in that. Because when you are becoming a public speaker, you want to make sure that the people who are hiring you know what they're getting, and they know uh, who's going to be the best fit for their audience. Another example, I have 1,000 of them. I had the opportunity to create and run a very successful National Speakers Bureau through the nonprofit that I created. And when people would send in requests about wanting speakers to come out to their university, I would literally coordinate that with the school and with our speakers. So we had about 15 different speakers, all within the same kind of theme of domestic violence and relationships, but everyone's story was different. So what I would do is literally, have the school fill out an application. They literally would tell me who they were interested in having speak. And then from there, I would say, hey, well, based upon your application, I noticed that you didn't have Doris on there. She's actually a former police officer. She's a survivor as well. She's a woman of faith. And I noticed that your school is faith based. Do you think that would be a better fit than maybe someone else that is on our speakers bureau? And so, wanting to be able to pair the right person with the right audience and demographic is really important. Because if I came in to a convention and it's all, I have no idea, um, Spanish speaking advocates, and I personally don't speak Spanish, even though I am Puerto Rican, um, I would suggest someone that maybe spoke Spanish or maybe had a different life experience than I did to be a better fit for that. So you want to think about your story as a whole, even bigger than the umbrella, to think about, well, who is my ideal audience? Who do I want to speak to? Who resonates with my message? And again, if you're like, well, Kristen, I don't know these answers, let's spend some time talking about that to figure out who is your demographic, who is your ideal audience, who should you be marketing your message to? And honestly, that also ties into what content should you be sharing on social media to promote this angle of you and your story and your personal brand as a professional speaker. So, think about all those things. Go ahead and put me on pause real quick to think about what your stories upon stories is, to think about creating your umbrella with chapters. So, again, to kind of recap real quick, your umbrella is the overall theme, the overall quote unquote book title, if you will. And within that book title, you have things like shorter chapters that have different pieces of information that, again, bring value and education to the table. It's not just you uh, writing about just yourself as a whole, but what in yourself and what in those stories that make you you can you talk about to different audiences. So go ahead and put me on pause. Think about your umbrella with chapters. And again, feel free to put me on pause for as long as you need, because you are more than just one umbrella. I can give you 1,000 different umbrella ideas and 1,000 different chapters that make up Kristen Faith as a person. Now, for the time being, feel free to write a couple umbrellas, feel free to write a couple chapters, and this hopefully inspires and ignites some ideas within you for you to think about, I am actually more than just a domestic violence advocate. I'm more than just a mom. I'm more than just a wife. Gosh, I have so many different themes and so many different audiences that I can reach, and I want to reach them. So put me on pause, start thinking about that idea, because we're going to get into some new ideas here in just a second. Now, because we are virtual, we don't necessarily have the opportunity or the bandwidth to share as a group, but feel free to shoot me over some ideas of what your chapters and what your umbrellas look like. And maybe, just maybe, you are brave enough to call up your bestie and say, hey, I have some ideas. What do you think about if I talked about this, that, or the other topic? I want to encourage you actually to call up your bestie and say, hey, so I just did this training with Kristen Faith from Boss Babe Networking. And one of the activities was to call your bestie and say, hey, I'm thinking about becoming a public speaker, or better yet, I'm brushing up on my public speaking skills, and I want your feedback on this real quick. What do you think about me starting to talk about these topics? Do you think I'm qualified? Do you think I am missing something? Who do you think I should be talking to? Do you know anyone that I can be talking with? I want you to put me on pause again, call up your bestie, and share some of the topics, umbrellas, and chapters with them and get their feedback. Maybe, just maybe, they have more topics and more themes that you forgot about because you are just so modest and you don't want to talk about that time that you were in the Olympics, or maybe that time that you won that one award with the Colorado Springs Business Journal. Maybe you don't want to talk about that time that you did, that huge partnership with that giant tech company. Or maybe you are shy about talking about, um, how you went from nothing to something great. Maybe there are some topics that you are missing that you forgot about, and you want someone to hear your umbrellas and your chapters. So call up your bestie and share some of those ideas with them, and think about what are some topics that maybe you might be missing. So go ahead and put me on pause and handle that real quick. And then we're going to jump into public speaking tips and preparing for your story. All right, so here comes the fun stuff, my friends. So, public speaking tips. So, when you decide what you are wanting to speak about, here are some tips and tricks that I would highly recommend you to do prior to actually getting in front of a microphone or in front of a stage. Now, I really mean this when I say practice makes perfect, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But when you first start speaking, you're going to find, and maybe it's just me, but you're going to find that you might be a little nervous. You might be a little scared. You might be a little judgmental of yourself and this idea of you starting to share your story. Now, here are some tips. I'm going to walk you through them real quick to really get you in the mindset of, hey, practice does make perfect. And honestly, you just have to get out there and do it. Number one, step outside of your comfort zone. The best way for you to do the unthinkable is by doing what you haven't done before. And so for me, getting out there and public speaking, by the time I started sharing my DV story, I kind of had some experience doing that, but again, not this topic. When we're talking about something that has to do with trauma or a life experience or really something that's really uh sensitive to us, something that really impacted us. Maybe you want to talk about losing a loved one. And let me tell you, going through grief is hard. Literally, it's hard. And if you haven't been through it, it's just really hard. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So be be cautious of that and be mindful that when you do start sharing your story and start opening up those wounds and pouring that alcohol on it, you're going to need to do a lot of self-care in that process as well. And you want to be gentle with yourself because it is really hard to open up those wounds and open up those sensitive parts of your story and, face that real vulnerable moment. So think about that. So, when you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, that could look like a variety of different things. Number one, stepping outside of your comfort zone means, oh my gosh, I'd never been a public speaker before. What if someone judges me? What if someone's in the audience that's more qualified to talk about this than I am? What if, what if, what if? If we get stuck in the what if, we are never going to do it. But honestly, it starts somewhere. Everyone always asks me, well, Kristen, where do you start when it comes to public speaking? I'm going to get into that in just a second. But when you start public speaking, you kind of want to start small. And when I mean small, literally talk to a youth group, literally talk to your church, literally talk to your friends and family, literally test pilot this whole thing out to get your feet wet and then dive right in because that's the best way that you're going to be able to kind of push yourself outside of your comfort zone to achieve the results that you're trying to see. So literally get out there as much as you can, build up your resume and start getting outside of your comfort zone so you can be so uncomfortable that you have no choice but to keep going forward. Value. I said it before during our presentation today. It's about bringing and sharing a message and what value am I bringing to that audience. So when I go out and share my story about domestic violence, it's not just, hey, Kristen went through something traumatic and that's it. It's much more than that. It's when I'm sharing my story, what information or what takeaways can I give them in that moment or in that story to help them understand, hey, this is what to look for in abusive relationships. This is what you should do to have a healthy relationship. This is what you can do to help a friend. So these are three gems that I want to be able to add when I am speaking about a topic like DV. It could be completely different for you and your story. So, what value can you bring beyond just, hi, I'm Kristen, and this is what my story is? Think about any keynote presentation, any luncheon that you went to, any TED talk that you went or heard on social media or on YouTube. They are giving you some sort of value that you can take and put in your knowledge toolbox. So think about that. What value can I bring to that audience? Next, find the purpose. Well, why are you sharing your story or your message? To me, it's to educate, to inspire, and to create change. So for me, having a purpose is so important in sharing your story so you know your why. I'm not sharing, and I did not share my story about domestic violence to highlight or to spotlight the person who abused me. That is the furthest from the truth. The reason why I share my story and continue to share it is because I want to educate people on something that I didn't understand when I was growing up and as a young woman. And so when you're sharing your story, what value can you bring and why are you doing it? I know you're not doing it just for the money. I know that if you had the opportunity to change the world, I know you would do it. So if your reason is to change the world in whatever shape, form, or whatever that looks, smells, or tastes like, run with that. Keep that to your core because that is going to be your motivating factor as to why you get up every day to do what you're doing to inspire greatness within yourself and the community around you. Boom, tailoring your speech to your audience. This is really important. So, one of the things that I want you to consider when sharing your story is who am I speaking to? If you went through something traumatic, let's just go with that because that's my thing. If you went through something traumatic and you're speaking to a group of young high school students, depending on the age of the students, depending on maybe even the feel of the room, like if this group of girls happens to have gone through traumatic situations, do you want to open a wound for them? Are they prepared? Are they equipped? Are there professionals in the room that are going to support them after you share your story? I know a lot of times when I've shared my story, there were actually therapists in the room with me. So in the event someone was triggered, they were able to have that support with them there in that moment. But maybe you're sharing your story and you want to be able to provide guidance to them afterwards. Or maybe you're talking to young professionals and they don't have uh, that Rolodex of information that you might know, or maybe other professionals might know. So really cater your audience or cater your message to your audience and think about that. That way, you're speaking the same language. They understand what you're saying. They can follow you because they understand. Or maybe they have different life experiences than you. So if you're talking about trauma and you're like, yeah, why are people going through, unhealthy relationships? And all these people, for some reason, have not gone through that. They are not going to relate to that. So you want to make sure that when you are asked to present at a luncheon, or maybe a youth group, or maybe at a school conference, or maybe at a school classroom, that you ahead of time get this information so you are prepared and you tailor your speech to your audience, because you don't want your message to completely go over someone's head. You want to be prepared and you want to make sure that you're giving them the right information and they can soak it in accordingly. Practice, 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 practice. This is so important because without practice, you're going to flub up your words. Without practice, you might say. Without practice, you're going to get nervous. Without practice, you're going to be unprepared. And we do not want you to be unprepared, especially the first time you go on stage. So you want to make sure that you're practicing, whether it's in front of a mirror to kind of give you some ideas. Literally, leading up to this point, I did a lot of public speaking practice with groups like the Lions Club. I don't know if they have that where you're at, but Lions Club, Rotary clubs, different youth groups in churches, smaller groups, friends groups, family groups, um, different therapy groups. I literally practiced my message to a tons of different people. I went on Facebook Live. I literally wrote my story. I literally threw my story away. I literally did this a million times over again, to really just get more comfortable with this idea of like, okay, I'm going to be talking about things that are really uncomfortable, and it might also be uncomfortable for people who are listening. So I want to be mindful of that. So again, consider community groups, youth groups, friends, family groups. There are so many different places that are looking for speakers all the time to really just amplify, education and a message that they might be offering to their group. So think about that before you start asking for compensation to speak. Get those practice sessions under your belt so you can get really comfortable when you are asked to do a keynote presentation and be able to, get on those big stages. Crafting the message, utilize the strategies that we've talked about in this presentation to get you comfortable with this idea of being in front of an audience. There are so much different things that you can do to craft your message to make sure that you're sharing the right things, you're adding that value, that you're adding that educational piece to get you comfortable and really in the know with your audience. So, how to prepare for your story. So, here are some literal steps that you can take to prepare for that moment that you're asked to do a keynote, that you're asked to do a paid gig in Wichita, Kansas, that you're asked to go on a national tour. You want to make sure that your ducks are in a row. So, number one, be yourself. You are perfect the way you are. Don't feel like you have to change anything. Some people get so consumed with this idea where I have to dress this way or I have to act this way. I'm brutally honest. And sometimes that's a good thing. And sometimes, quite honestly, it isn't a great thing. So be yourself, dress with confidence. And so that looks like something else for someone else. I personally love a hot red lip. I love big earrings and I love chunky jewelry. And that might not be your style, but I want you to make sure that when you step on stage, whether you are speaking at a youth group, a church summit, whatever the case may be, I want you to dress to impress every single time. Do not miss. And the reason why is because your outfit, the way that you present yourself, the confidence that you are going to exude in that moment is going to show. And so you want to make sure that you are dressing appropriately and confidently to really grab the attention of the audience to make that statement. Prepare in advance. That is very important. So, how long are you speaking? What's the audience type? How is the room going to be set up? These are all questions that you want to ask whoever is booking you for that gig or that opportunity. You want to come in prepared so you can prepare for 1,000 people. You can prepare for theater seating. You can prepare for whatever the case may be, to make sure that you are prepared for your presentation. Find support. If you have not joined Boss Babe Networking, I highly recommend it. We have different trainings and opportunities like this all the time to help you amplify your message, your voice, and your professional and personal development skills. So I encourage you to tap in with us immediately. Toastmasters, that is specifically a public speaking group. There are literally thousands of groups all across the country, depending on where you're located at. They're a great group that literally helps you learn how to become a public speaker. Community groups like youth groups, church groups, whatever the case may be, maybe groups that you are a part of, maybe nonprofits that you are a part of. Use those groups to your advantage to help you get your message out and to also amplify the work that they are doing as well. Delivery. Delivery is so important because it helps really tell the story of how you were delivering the message. Now, if I started this presentation like super tired or super just not excited to be here, instantly you probably would turn this presentation off, say, I want a refund, I'm done, goodbye, because I'm not excited to be here. But for me, the delivery of this presentation is everything. Literally, how I'm talking to you right now is literally how I show up and show out for my presentations. Now, I sometimes, believe it or not, depending on who I'm speaking to and really the vibe of what we're trying to accomplish, I can get my Tony Robbins on. I literally did a presentation for the Women's March a couple years ago, and was super excited to be on stage and literally hyping up hundreds of people who are literally fighting for equality and for women to have a voice here in the country. And for me, I felt the energy in the room. I felt the anger. I felt the emotions. And so I couldn't hold back when I went on stage and hit that microphone and literally was amplifying that message of here we are coming together, here we are amplifying our voices, here we are breaking the silence and empowering people to be their best self, and we need to do this together as a community. And you feel that excitement. Now, if I'm walking on stage and everyone's just tired and they're not excited, that's going to be really hard for me to kind of kick into gear with that excitement that I just shared with you. So when you are delivering that message, and I seen this during our Boss Babe Academy, it's a program that we created for young women between the ages of 10 and 19 years old last year. And we had the opportunity to tap into this group in our community. I saw different types of speakers. the overall arching theme was empowerment, self-expression, business, and life skills. Everyone came with a different topic. Everyone presented differently. Everyone had a different delivery. But what I've noticed that the speakers that really resonated with our youth were the speakers who were in their face, who were excited, who were challenging them, who were pushing them outside of their comfort zone. And that's what those girls needed. Some speakers were more lackadaisical. Some speakers were more chill. Some speakers prepared more than others. Some speakers had presentations, others didn't. And so think about that. When you are delivering a message, what assets do I need to really amplify the message for that particular audience? And so, what I will say is ready, set, go. It's time to shine. So, I want you to start thinking about where you can go to start sharing your message. I want you to start researching different groups, different opportunities, to start putting yourself out there to get your message heard. Now, there's a type of message that can be motivational and encouraging and more of a motivational message versus a training. Those are two different types of ways that you can share your story. Now, if I was doing an educational piece on, how medical professionals can do better in helping domestic violence victims, that's going to be a different audience and a different type of presentation than maybe a speech that's more geared towards youth. Or maybe I'm talking to, again, the Women's March, which is more of a motivational message. I'm not necessarily teaching you about the warning signs and the tips and tricks about domestic violence. I'm literally encouraging you and activating you and engaging the community to be a part of the solution of ending relationship violence. So think about that. Do you want to be a motivational speaker, or do you want to be a presenter, a teacher, an educator? Those are two different types of presentations, both in which one person could do, but I would suggest doing it differently, because how you are going to approach that message is, again, going to be different. So when you are thinking about your umbrella and your themes, think about, well, shoot, are these educational? Are these more of a motivational message? Can I tailor it to be an educational piece and or a motivational message? Can I offer essentially 6 different presentations, one style of motivation and one style of educational? Those are two different types of styles that you can 100% do. Now, if you do not have experience in doing that motivational style, I want to encourage you to go on YouTube and watch people that you like their style, you like their delivery, and kind of mimic and kind of get some inspiration from those individuals, so you can know, okay, I like this person. I like this Brene Brown. I like Tony Robbins. I like Kristen Faith. Those are the types of styles that you want to kind of work towards. That is 100% a-okay. Just start thinking about where you want to go and where you want to take that message. So one day, my friend, you can be on that TED Talk stage and doing a TEDx for someone in your community and inspiring people in your community to take action. This was me in the Sephora headquarters, literally doing a training for thousands of their employees on domestic violence. I had the opportunity to take my story to a corporate level to educate literally their management, their staff, and their employees about DV and what they can do to be better advocates for the cause. Now, there are so many opportunities that are literally waiting at your doorstep and are waiting for you to get prepared and get ready to literally strap up and share your message with the world. If you would have told me a couple years ago that I would have the opportunity to speak to Sephora in the Sephora headquarters, the same place that Rihanna and hundreds of other beauty influencers get to walk into, that same building and share their products with Sephora, I had the same opportunity to be in that same floor, in that same building with those same professionals that deal and work with those same celebrities. This partnership literally started off as a makeup class at a local place in San Diego at the time. That partnership grew and grew and grew over the years, to the point where Sephora personally invited myself and my husband to do an educational workshop for their staff. And that training had the opportunity to bring us out to San Francisco to be inside of the Sephora headquarters to do this. Now, I want to encourage you. We belong to something beautiful, and your story is beautiful. I know it might hurt. I know it might be uncomfortable. I know right now you might not have the skills and the tools in your toolbox, but I hope that you have those tools now and start cultivating that. And I'm going to give you some resources and some information on how we can stay connected so we can create and craft your story together. I'm so excited that you are going to be taking this next step in your journey. And I'm so excited that you had the opportunity to chime in to this workshop right here. Now, don't be afraid. There's so many things that this world has to offer you. And I'm so excited to hear the greatness that is coming your way. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me on any one of these socials or even at my email as well. I'm excited again to hear all of the great things that you are going to be doing for your story, your personal brand, and everything in between. Remember, you are great, and greatness is here, and it's time to channel that greatness and share it with the world. Now, again, don't be afraid. You got this. I cannot wait to chat more, but until then, goodbye. Have a wonderful day. And I hope and hope and hope that your story literally changes the world.